Welcome to the National Institute of Academics. What is gross domestic product? Gross domestic product (GDP) is a macroeconomic measure that represents the total value of all final goods and services produced within a country's borders over a specific time period, typically a year. GDP includes personal consumption, expenditures (PCE), household spending on goods and services such as food, housing, healthcare, and entertainment, gross investment, business spending on capital goods, like new buildings, equipment, and inventories, government spending, federal, state, and local government, expenditures on goods and services, like infrastructure, education, and defense, net exports, the value of exports minus imports, representing the country's trade balance. GDP can be calculated using three approaches. Expenditure approach adds up the amount spent by households, businesses, government, and foreigners on goods and services. Income approach calculates the income earned by households and businesses, including wages, rents, and profits. Value-added approach measures the value added to goods and services at each stage of production. GDP is usually expressed as a nominal value, but it can also be adjusted for inflation to get the real GDP, which reflects the actual growth of the economy. GDP is important because it measures economic growth. GDP growth rate indicates the expansion or contraction of the economy, influences interest rates. Central banks use GDP data to set interest rates, which affect borrowing and spending. Impacts government policies. GDP informs fiscal policies, such as taxation and spending, to promote economic growth. Affects international trade. GDP influences exchange rates and trade balances with other countries. Reflects standard of living. GDP per capita per person is a rough estimate of a country's standard of living. Limitations of GDP include: ignores income inequality. GDP doesn't account for wealth distribution among the population, excludes non-market activities. Unpaid work, like household chores, and illegal activities are not included. Doesn't account for environmental degradation. GDP doesn't consider the environmental impact of economic activities. In summary, GDP is a comprehensive measure of a country's economic activity, but it should be considered in conjunction with other indicators to get a more complete picture of a nation's economic health and well-being.